Okay, let's get started. So welcome to today's 30 Minutes with Lynxspring webinar series. I'm Marc Petock, Vice President of Marketing at Lynxspring, and we thank you for joining us today. As we all know, Niagara 4 is now released, so our next few webinars in our series will be devoted to some of the key features within Niagara 4. Today's session, we're going to look at Niagara 4 charting. Charting within Niagara 4 allows users to create, modify, and render dynamic web-based charts and display interactive charts in ProBuilder as well as in HTML5 capable web browsers. These charts are built with HTML5. This means that the user experience will be consistent across ProBuilder, PX, HX, and web browser views. So today I've got the pleasure of introducing Jim Ryan from Lynxspring University, who will review and demo the key features and the benefits of charting within Niagara 4. He'll also cover some new chart views, interactivity, and the enhanced functionality that Niagara 4 brings to data visualization. Just a couple reminders that since the webinar is scheduled for 30 minutes, we will have limited time for questions. So please use the chat function within the program here on the GoToWebinar meeting, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in the allotted time. Should you have additional questions or would want more information, you can always email marketing@lynxspring.com or training@lynxspring.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you soon after the webinar. And as is the case every time, we will be posting this for future viewing, both the slide presentation as well as the audio. And finally, before Jim comes on, I just want to remind everybody on the phone that preparation for the Lynxspring Exchange is rocking and rolling. This is our upcoming customer event, October 26th through the 28th. We would love to have you join if you haven't signed up yet. So take a look at the information on lynxspringexchange.com and join us. So without further ado, Jim, let me turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Marc. All right, just like Marc said, today we're going to go into Niagara 4 and see what we can do with the new features and functionality in the charting. So what I've got open right now is actually a Genesis PC6000 that is set up with Niagara 4 on it, and we have a station with some demo files. As we go into the visualization of the charting, I want to point out that this new chart view that we're going to explore is now the default visualization for both the normal live charts, time plots type charting, as well as the history charts. So they share this new view. And in fact, they can both reside on the same page together. The old AX time plots and history chart views are still there, and they're still selectable in Niagara 4 if you prefer those views. So the first thing I'm going to do is just expand down in my station, and you'll see that under this charting folder, I have several objects, just ramps feeding into some notional temperatures, that kind of thing. And when I select this numeric writable point, this boiler, and I look at the views, I see that there is, in addition to the traditional views I would expect to see, there's a new view here, and that is the chart view. When I select this chart view, what's actually happening is in that little area of the screen, the chart pane, an HTML5 browser basically opens, and we see this HTML5 view start. And this will be just like the live charts that we're used to. And what we're actually seeing on this notional boiler temp is the temperature cycling and updating and rescaling live as the points come in. So this is an example of what we're used to seeing with like a time plot where it builds from the beginning and keeps on going. And that's a really useful view here just to see what a point is doing. If you look at the interface itself, you'll see that we have cleaner lines and kind of a more modern looking interface on the chart compared to what we're used to with Niagara 4, the Niagara AX framework. And from that sense, Niagara 4 has kind of breathed new life into this charting and data visualization area. This view is not only available on control points, like the numeric writable here, but also on history records, schedules, and even entire folders full of components, as well as any data that comes out of series transform. That's where we'll find the option to bring one of these charts up. And having this single data plot is nice, but if I want to capture the full value of data visualization, I need to be able to easily add and manipulate the data series that are displayed here on the chart. Fortunately, with Niagara 4, that's pretty simple and intuitive. The first way I can add a series to this chart is up here on the toolbar. I have this little plus icon. It's going to bring up my station tree, and I can go in and choose a second object to add. In this case, I'll add this boiler 110. And it's going to add it to the screen. It's going to show me which color it's going to plot in. And I probably just grabbed a point that's not actually plotting right now. So let me add another one. The second way I can add data to this chart is simply by dragging it over from the nav tree and dropping it, which makes it really easy to start visualizing what's going on with different points in the station. And I can add multiple pieces that way. If we watch this view, it's going to continue to resize based on the first plot that I dropped, or the first series that I dropped. And that's because right here we have this toggle home zoom enabled. And what that does is it takes the very first series plotted on the chart and constantly rescales the chart to keep that in view. We have other options. We can take this little drop down here in the time range selector and choose any one of a number of preset, like last 24 hours, yesterday, last week, last month, even last year, and roll all of our data up that way. But I also have the option to select a specific time range. So I can go straight to an area of interest, particularly when I'm working with history charts, and I'm trying to drill down to an area where I know there were problems. So with this view, I can actually choose the start and end time, and that will freeze the axes on both the X and Y to match that data set. I can leave the end data unchecked, which is going to allow it to just continually bring in that live data as well. And if I wanted to zoom to that range, I would use this little function here that I'm mousing over now called toggle time zoom. And that zooms to the data sets basically viewed according to the little selector that's here in the time range dropdown. So that can be pretty convenient. I can also scale my axes simply by clicking and dragging on them. So I can zoom in and out and kind of expand my view both on the X, and now we'll start to see some of that boiler 1 data come into play, as well as the Y axis, so that I can narrow it down and zoom in. Beyond grabbing just those axes themselves, I can use my mouse wheel and roll in and out on the chart and have it zoom where my cursor is pointed, and I can zoom both the X and Y axis together that way. So we have a few different ways to toggle ourselves in or to get drilled in to the data. When we're looking at the values on a chart and trying to compare the data, we're probably doing it for a reason. So it's probably useful for us to be able to determine what the value a series is holding at a particular point. And what you've noticed as I've moused over this chart is I have a little crosshair icon, and when I hover over one of the data series, I get a pop-up that shows the data point corresponding to where my mouse location is, and it's giving me the value of that data series as well as the status, in this case, unact alarm, as well as the timestamp for it. And as I go over each series, I can jump between them and see what each series is holding. But even more useful than that, I can actually choose a specific time, say 11:55. And if I left-click my mouse, I get this pop-up that shows me the values of every series plotted on the chart currently at that time frame. So when I'm trying to troubleshoot something that's going on, I can find out what all the different values on a chart are, even if I've zoomed outside of that range and I've got something that's really plotting well down below the visible area. It's still going to pop up here in this window. And that vertical reference line stays there, and I get a second reference line that I can use to still do my mouse overs. So let's move back to the toolbar at the top of the chart now that we've explored the toggle home zoom and we've talked about what toggle time zoom does. The next series is to toggle the deltas, and this is exactly what we would expect. We will now see the rate of change of each of these series instead of their actual values. And that's just a toggle that we can use to go back and forth between that view. The next new command we have is toggle sampling. For data sets that are greater than 2,500 points, toggling the sampling on lets you narrow that data set down by using either averages or mins and maxes, and we get to set that behavior. But it cleans up your data so that it's more legible when you're encountering a very large data set. We can also choose this little button, which is toggle status coloring. Toggle status coloring makes each one of the data points shown on the chart pop up with its appropriate Niagara status. In this case, you can see that several of my data points are red because I have an alarm, and that is demonstrating that the temperatures are out of range at that point. Now, this would work for any Niagara status. So we'll see orange dots for fault, and tan dots for stale, and purple dots wherever it's overridden, etc. Finally, I have this pause button, and the pause button is going to allow me to just stop the live data updates for a second, particularly when I'm in that home zoom scroll, and just take a look at where the data is, and then untoggling that will resume live data. There's one final button on this menu right now that we haven't explored yet, and that is the export wizard. And this is going to allow us to export these charts in a variety of formats. When I do this from inside of the Niagara workbench or inside of ProBuilder tool, my only destination option is the station. So this is going to save to the file space of the station. Now, if I'm accessing this view through a web browser, I actually get the opportunity to save it to my remote device or my local device that I'm operating on as well. And I have two choices here. I can either save the standard CSV file, or I can save a chart view. This new chart view, when I save it, is actually going to go ahead and save all of the data on this screen, including which data series are currently being plotted. If I were to then say navigate away from this view, and I wanted to get back to that same view, I can come to the file space, choose the chart, and select the chart that I was just on, and it is going to start plotting that data again. And in this case, I'll need to go ahead and get it back down to a useful location with my zoom so I don't see all the data at once. What this is going to allow you to do is kind of host a chart on a web page that always has the data that a user expects to see without having to constantly rebuild the chart. Or they can find a chart that shows anomalies, save it off in this format, and send it to you, and you'll be able to go back in and see the exact same view they were getting or the exact same data sets and check for errors. Once we've used this and done an exported chart, we'll actually have the option now, this little save button, to save this view. That's going to constantly save that chart file so that it can be updated. In this way, if a user updates it because they no longer want the alarm demo displayed and they were to remove it, they'd have the option to then save the chart in that new format. By clicking on the title, we can actually change the title of the chart itself. And this will not only change the save file, but it'll change the name on the graphics that are displayed as well. And I think we're actually losing connection to our Jenny right now. So I apologize. Looks like we're having a little bit of difficulty Keeping our Jenny connection. All right. And if I were to go ahead and rename this file, I can get a different chart title. Okay. We also have the ability, as we're looking at all of this data, to hide particular data sets. So if this pink alarm demo is really kind of getting in the way of me seeing what I'm doing, I can hide it without removing it from the chart by simply toggling off its color button. And I can drill down to the data series that I want to see as opposed to the full data set. And I can always add them back simply by recoloring them. Now, if I no longer wanted this on the chart, if I right-click on the name of the series, I get the option to remove it from the chart. And my chart's going to immediately update. I'm also given the option to remove all other series from the chart, or to set one of these as the new primary data set, which is going to allow me to then change what my toggle home zoom is actually working off of. So if I remove all of the other data sets, I'm going to zoom into the current data set instead. I can even remove this from the chart and have just a blank chart that I can use. And I can drag data out from inside of my station and actually create a new chart simply by dragging them out. I could drag these fan voltages, for example, out of my occupancy demo, and I can bring those in. Now up here on the right-hand side, we have our settings, which we haven't addressed yet, and that's going to give us a few different settings, including the ability to switch between the charted value or the charted line type. So I can go from a line chart to a discrete line chart. We have the new chart called a shade chart, which I'll demo in a moment, and we could also even turn on bar charts. From this point, I could also change the colors of the line series to make it more easily seen. And when I hit OK, it's going to go ahead and make those changes. Even from here, turning on the toggle status colors would actually toggle on alarms and that sort of thing. On a bar chart, it shows in the very top portion of the bar. And then for a shade chart, the shade chart is actually the default view of all of our schedule type objects, our enumerated objects, and our Boolean objects. So if I drag out this Boolean schedule, I'm going to see the new shade chart. And a shade chart simply gives you one color for occupied and a lighter version of that color for unoccupied. And when combined with some of these data series, particularly if I make the data set more useful again, that didn't take. All right, there we go. Well, now my demo doesn't want to work. So here, I'll pull up the blue series. I would be able to see if perhaps equipment is running during an unoccupied time, which is what my orange series is supposed to be showing. There it is. And I can quickly see the value of this type of charting where I can look at the different series and see how they're comparing to each other. All right. If we dig back into these settings a little bit further, we find ourselves the ability to do some axis settings, which includes changing which side of the page, the y-axis, and its labels are on. We can choose the behavior of that home zoom from just the primary series to all series. And that's going to be really useful for keeping large data sets all in the picture. If one of them is starting to climb out and it's not the primary series, it'll still rescale. I can remove the grid lines. I can toggle on a background color if I saw the need for that. And I can choose whether I actually have that crosshair cursor or the regular arrow cursor displayed. On the Layers segment, I have the ability to turn off the data pop-up. That was that little window that followed my mouse around and demonstrated the value of the given series at that point in time, or the left-click behavior, actually. The data mouse over is the little window that followed my mouse around, and that I can turn off as well. And I can also turn off the ability to bleed those Niagara status colors through if I wanted to make sure those never showed through onto that particular graphic. Finally, I have the ability to set my sampling behavior. I can choose whether Niagara is automatically allowed to sample the data for me, and then I can choose the way that I want it to sample. In this case, in data sets higher than 2,500 points, it's going to take 500 data points out of that by either averaging, taking the minimum or maximum value of that given clump that it's going to make a new point for, or it's going to do a sum of all of those. And I choose that behavior rate here. And that's going to go ahead and just narrow down those really large data sets for me. Like I said, if I actually choose a point that has a history on it, and we saw that with the alarm demo, which had an interval history, it's automatically going to bring in all of the historical data as well. I apologize, this is actually really difficult to see because it's a very narrow data set. So I can view historical data and the live data on a single chart together, which is valuable. More information on this tool can actually be found in the Niagara charting document. It's new in your Niagara 4 installations. We see the immediate value of charting, particularly in a supervisor application. Ideally, being able to just provide a new look and feel overlay on top of your existing functioning, perfectly tuned AX system, as we like to think. So we could go ahead and just use this to provide some new, updated, fresher charting views to that end user and show immediate value that way, mainly because these charts do work a little bit nicer than the Niagara AX charting, and they're completely HTML5 based. And it's important to stress that that particular view, those charts, are built entirely in HTML5, which is going to be able to be displayed without the Java applet in the browser. And it also works just as well on mobile devices and is really engineered for that from the ground up. That is all of the information that I have to present for the charting today. We'll go ahead and look and see if we have a few questions, or if there are any questions in there that we can look for. And I'll try to answer some of those. And if you have a question, please do just go ahead and type it into the chat box. If not, we appreciate you joining us for today's webinar. And we've really only scratched the surface of the new charting and visualization tools and the new options in Niagara 4 in general. So look forward to more webinars upcoming in this series as we start looking at additional ways we can use the new features of Niagara 4, particularly to provide value as a supervisor option. And I'm not seeing any questions coming in. So if you do have further questions, I'll just remind you, please do email marketing@lynxspring.com or training@lynxspring.com, and we'll get right back to you. This webinar will be posted afterward on YouTube, and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel. And I would like to also, just one more reminder, to please look at the Lynxspring Exchange website. We're offering some special training following it up for those that attend, and we're going to have some really special opportunities to get hands-on with a lot of our products. And that's going to be at lynxspringexchange.com. If you need to find your way there. And that's where you'll also find more information about the training that's being offered post-event, where we'll be giving some new opportunities there to get hands-on with our products. And then to register, you simply use your Register Now button, and that'll get you started. And if you have any problems getting through on this, please again contact marketing@lynxspring.com or training@lynxspring.com, and we'll get you taken care of. Thank you again for joining today's webinar.